The twin suns dipped below the crimson mountains of Zyrith, casting long shadows across the silver dunes. In the village of crystalline spires, laughter echoed, sharp, cruel, and metallic. The nobles of House Vreen were hosting another of their extravagant feasts, and tonight, the gossip was tastier than the food. "Marry my blind sister," one of the nobles sneered, his 4 eyes glittering with mockery. Maybe the human will accept that, since no proper Zirathai woman would. Across the hall stood Ethan Cole, the only human on Zyrith, a man who'd arrived years ago as an ambassador between Earth and the Zirathai Empire. He was tall by human standards, but among the towering luminous aliens, he looked almost fragile. Yet there was something unyielding in his calm expression, a quiet strength that silenced more people than any weapon could. Ethan took a sip of the glowing drink they'd offered him and met the noble's gaze evenly. "I don't mock the blind," he said simply. "Perhaps you should introduce me." The laughter faltered, replaced by murmurs. Lady Aelira Vreen, the supposed blind sister, sat at the far end of the table. Her eyes, pale silver and unfocused, were turned slightly away from the crowd. Her face, delicate and marked with faint luminescent veins, betrayed no reaction to the mockery. She had been born blind, and in the ruthless Zirathai hierarchy, physical imperfection was a curse. To them she was a burden. To her family an embarrassment. But Ethan's words made her still. "You would meet her?" one of the nobles asked incredulously. Ethan's lips curved faintly. "I said I would." The following day, under the pale glow of Zyrith's twin moons, Ethan was escorted to Aelira's private garden, a sanctuary of sound and scent. The air shimmered with silver blossoms that sang softly when touched by the wind. She stood waiting, her head tilted slightly toward him as he approached. "You must be the human everyone whispers about," she said softly. Her voice carried no bitterness, only quiet curiosity. "And you must be the woman they underestimate," Ethan replied. Aelira smiled faintly. "They mock what they fear. My blindness unsettles them." Ethan watched her fingers glide gently along the petals of a singing flower. "Then they're fools," he said. "You see more than they do." That made her pause. "You believe that?" "I've met people with perfect sight who are blind to everything that matters." For a long moment, the garden was silent but for the hum of the blossoms. Then she laughed. Softly, almost musically. "You're strange for a human." He smiled. "I've heard that before." Over the following weeks, Ethan returned again and again. They spoke for hours, of stars, of the fragile peace between worlds, of loneliness. She taught him how to walk the resonance paths that guided the blind across the garden, how to listen to the whisper of light and motion. In return, he told her of Earth's oceans, of storms and sunsets, of colors she could never see but somehow imagined perfectly. Lyra began to change. Her confidence grew. The servants who once pitied her now listened when she spoke. Word spread quickly. The blind sister was laughing again. But the nobles' mockery turned to anger. They saw the bond between the human and the outcast as an insult to their lineage. One evening, as Ethan arrived at the palace gates, he was stopped by armored guards. The High Lord himself awaited him in the great hall, flanked by the same nobles who had mocked Aelira. "You have overstepped, human," the High Lord thundered. "You shame this house by courting my defective daughter." Ethan's jaw tightened. "If caring for her is shame, then your honor is worth less than dust." Gasps filled the hall. No one spoke to the High Lord that way. The Lord's eyes burned. "Then you shall marry her, and be exiled beyond the dunes. Let your foolishness be your punishment." Ethan turned his gaze to Aelira, who stood trembling behind the guards. "If she wishes it," he said softly, "then I accept." The hall fell silent. Lyra's lips parted. I do," she whispered. The nobles erupted in laughter. A blind bride for a fool of a human. But Lyra took Ethan's hand, her fingers trembling yet sure. Together they walked out of the hall, not in disgrace but in defiance. They settled far beyond the glittering cities, on the edge of the whispering dunes where the sky shimmered like molten glass. Ethan built a home of crystal and steel, and there the two lived in peace. It was there that Lyra began to discover something extraordinary. Her blindness was not absence, it was transformation. At night, when the stars sang their silent frequencies, she could feel them. Her mind painted visions not of light, but of energy. She could sense life around her, the pulse of animals, the hum of the wind, even the faint echo of Ethan's heartbeat. She began to draw those sensations, shaping them into living light sculptures that floated in the air, mesmerizing and alive. When travelers eventually discovered them years later, they were awed by her creations. Word spread, the blind artist of the dunes who saw what others could not. Nobles came in secret, humbled before her art. Even her family dared not speak her name with mockery anymore. But the greatest masterpiece was the life they built together. On one quiet night, under the pale light of the moons, Lyra stood on the balcony, listening to the hum of the world. Ethan joined her, wrapping his arm gently around her shoulders. "They used to mock me," she whispered. "Now they send gifts." He chuckled softly. "People fear what they don't understand, until it becomes something they want." She turned her unseeing eyes toward him, her silver irises catching the faint glow. "Do you regret it? Leaving everything for me?" Ethan smiled. "Lyra, when I met you, I thought I was the one with sight. But you showed me how blind I'd been, to beauty, to purpose, to love. I didn't lose anything. I found everything." She pressed her forehead against his. "Then we are both blessed." The wind stirred the blossoms in the dunes, carrying their soft hum into the night. In the distance, the cities still glittered, blind to the truth that in exile, two souls had found the kind of vision that no eyes could ever give. And when the next dawn rose, painting the desert in hues of gold and violet, Lyra and Ethan stood hand in hand. Two beings from different worlds, united not by sight or power, but by the courage to see each other fully. They had mocked him once. They had laughed at her blindness. But in the end, it was they who couldn't see. The end.